Welcome to Marked Out Radio. I'm Sean,
And I'm Dana.
and today we're going to be talking about another aspect of con life that a lot of people have strong opinions about. But we first wanted to jump in and answer that question from last week about Squared Circle Expo in Indianapolis. So I got to say, we got a couple people writing in. There was someone left a comment on YouTube, and a couple others emailed in about how Squared Circle went. And I got to say, having never gone to the con myself, the feedback was uniformly positive. So, I mean, that's you always want to hear positive feedback about cons. People in particular were very complimentary of how the promoters run that show. So I think if you're on the fence and you had any doubts about it, I there were no red flags that jumped out for me about how it was run. It seemed like a pretty solid show. I mean, we don't endorse any individual shows because who the heck knows what can happen in the future. But I think your money is safely spent. In fact, I believe someone said that the VIPs for next show are already sold out well in advance. So I mean, that's typically a good sign that a con has a good reputation. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these cons. They push the VIPs extra hard, and so when they sell out far in advance, that usually means the con has a really good reputation. So yeah, feel free to spend your money and honestly let us know how it goes.
Absolutely right.
Do you know when the next show even is? I have no idea.
I don't.
Yeah, I didn't look into it. You know, the reality is, I try and not travel for cons anymore. There was a day when I would travel for cons to an extreme level. I've flown for cons before, and that's just not something I'm terribly interested in doing anymore, unless the name is really something unique. So you're the same way, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you didn't even fly to Utah for Mel Gibson this past weekend, so I think on a wrestling level, there wouldn't be a ton we need to get us out to Indianapolis, unfortunately.
I mean, the truth of it is, any wrestler who I care to meet, I've pretty much met. There's with very, 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 very limited exceptions. So, not getting me on. I mean, you know what? Actually, the only wrestler recently. It's funny because the people I've gotten on the plane for in the past were wrestlers. I flew to L.A. for Muta and Liger a few years back. I flew to Florida. I flew to Tampa for Undertaker about 12 years ago ish, give or take. And most recently, I flew to Chicago for Toshiaki Kawada, which I'm sure you thought was completely unhinged. But
a little bit.
Listen,
who am I to judge?
I mean, you know, if that's his only appearance in the U.S. in decades, I made it happen. And there was a little piece of me that wanted to fly to San Francisco for Aja Kong a few weeks ago, but I did not. So, but I thought the thought entered my mind for a half a second, but I quickly pushed it out and occupied it with some other nonsense. So, yeah. So if we're not traveling to Indianapolis, but by all means, if you're in the area, check out Squared Circle Expo.
Yes.
So yes, I had something. I had something this week. I did a little impromptu graphing. So actually, last night, I was at where was that? What was the venue? It was Warsaw in Brooklyn. This little club, and some bands who most people probably haven't heard of or listened to this podcast. But one Kansas City band was headlining the Get Up Kids. They had their day. They were pretty popular. And the opener was the Smoking Popes, a Chicago band who's been around forever. And I knew that it was raining last night, and the show didn't end until late. And I had an hour drive ahead of me. So I wasn't going to stay too long after the show to stick around for graphs, but something kind of funny happened. So while they were on stage, the Smoking Popes mentioned that they have a new LP that was just released this week, and they were selling them at the merch table. And they said, come on and buy one from us after the show is over. So whenever I hear something like that, my ears perk up, and it's funny because I was there with one of my friends, and so I didn't say anything to him at the time, but my ears perked up. Obviously I was going to try and get a record signed, the new record at the end of the show. And so there were two at these shows. Each band has its own merch table, so I did something slick. For the big band, for the headliner, the Get Up Kids, they had a couple of cool things at the merch table. They had signed vinyls which is for me, signed vinyls at the merch table is a godsend. If I don't have to wait like hours after the show is over.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah. And so I bought one, and I bought a T-shirt, and I just asked the guy, I'm like, can you hold these behind for me here, so I don't have to, carry them the whole time. And so after the show was over, the line for the Get Up Kids table was super long, but I didn't have to wait in it because my stuff was already pre-purchased. So I walked over and was the first person with the Get Up Kids. I'm sorry, I was the first person with Smoking Popes. And so when I walked over, I went up to the merch person, I bought the record, and I looked at the guys. I was like, "You guys mind signing these?" And so they all signed mine. And what I ended up doing, which is kind of funny, was creating sort of an impromptu signing session with the Smoking Popes, because once someone saw that I did it, then everyone came up and started doing it.
Of course.
So it became, once people realize, it's so funny though, because people won't ask, and so once I got the ball rolling and broke the seal on that, so to speak, then my buddy walked over. And it's funny because then my buddy, after the show was over, he's like, you really are attuned to how to navigate this signing things. It would never have occurred to me to do that. And I said, I don't know, that's what I'm gonna say. It's something that
Decades of experience will do that, I guess.
it was one of those things where, and then it became a signing with them, basically, because they were signing every copy that was sold. Which, frankly, you want to generate sales. If you're a band, you want to generate sales. It's a freaking no brainer to be selling signed ones at the table. Why wouldn't you? It costs you nothing.
Yeah, I'm
do
shocked that
So,
wasn't just the game plan going in for them.
I mean, I think part of it is there's still this holdover attitude that we've talked about before, that like not everyone wants something signed, or sometimes people have this mentality like, oh, no one wants my signature. Really, I'm going to ruin it. And that's something that I've heard people say. Do you remember when? This is going to go way off the rails here, but do you remember when we got we went to the Law and Order set, and I had that Law and Order SVU jacket?
Yep.
And when I approached Stephanie March, she was like, "You want me to write on this? Really?" Like, she was taken aback.
I remember
She was,
that.
yeah, she was taken aback that her signature would somehow ruin it. And I ended up selling that jacket for a decent amount of money. So, all is good. And you also had something happen this week.
I did. Tuesday night in Queens, New York at the Wrestling Universe. You had AAA and AEW star Black Taurus, aka the Beast Mortis. He was coming to town for the Grand Slam event. So it was a perfect storm where the promoter was able to sort of fly, get him here on Tony Khan's dime. So I had to schlep. I bet you were happy you didn't have to do that, right, Sean?
I absolutely was happy that I didn't go into Queens that night. I can't even debate that.
Yeah. I had to schlep in on a work night. I got there around 10 o'clock. I love the Wrestling Universe. There's so many familiar faces. So of course, I end up talking and chatting entirely too long. By the time I was done with my private and done chatting and all that stuff, it was like 12:15. So I got out of there. At that point, luckily, the drive is like under 45 minutes to my house because there's no traffic. So that was actually a nice thing. But yeah, extremely smooth. The biggest takeaway I had from the signing was his attention to detail, Black Taurus, on his signatures. He, on every item, questioned whether we wanted it either Black Taurus or the Beast Mortis. And each signature was honestly as elaborate and just perfect as the last. And a lot of us were remarking how they should send a lot of the performance center talent down to Mexico to learn signatures and handwriting, because I've noticed that a lot of the lucha libre talent, they still care about their signature. Have you had the same experience?
That is definitely that has been my experience as well. A lot of the lucha guys, especially the classic lucha guys, they always write like "Tu Amigo," and then they write their name, and it's always something. Not always, but it's frequently something that's a little bit more elaborate. There's usually some kind of design element to it. A lot of them incorporate in some way, like the mask that they're wearing into their signature. That's kind of fun when you see some of them do that. So absolutely, you'll notice that those guys care more. And so, some of the people, I mean, some of the people we've worked with care about their signature. Like Billy Starks comes to mind. You know how She does like the smiley face, which is part of her brand logo thing, as part of her
Yes, she
signature.
cares. She definitely cares.
Yeah, and we've had a couple who like clearly give it some thought, and then there are other ones who just clearly do not. But yeah, that's like anything else in life, right? But I meant to ask you, and I forgot. Did he bring with him like gimmick masks to sell at the table, or no?
He did. He had a couple. They were like they appeared to be like latex. They almost looked more like
Yeah,
Halloween mask style than like the typical ring masks that you see. But I suppose that's the only way to make a mask like his. It's probably the way
yeah.
his is actually made.
I actually regret, because I had met Black Taurus at the Philly Lucha Expo a couple of years ago, and I had already dropped a decent amount of money on that whole weekend. So, yeah, I had bought ring worn masks from Ultimo Dragon and Lince Dorado and stuff. So I was already, not thrilled about spending a ton of money, and so I wanted to buy his really cool latex mask, but I was like, at the time he was not. At the time, he wasn't even that pushed in AAA. He was just starting his big push in AAA. So I unfortunately passed on that, and I was like, yeah. And I meant to ask you if he was. I didn't even think, but I meant to ask you to look to see if he was selling one, that I would grab one. But whatever. I will live. I will survive without another lucha mask in a bag under my bed. So I will live without that. And especially ultimately, I know latex masks over time will degrade anyway. That's just something that happens. So
Yes,
because they're biological material. There's no preserving them. They will eventually disappear. So
that's a very depressing little like microcosm of like life sort of rolled into the hobby, like the lack of permanence in life, because I have far too many masks in my office right now. I'm looking at them as we speak, and I'd love to get them signed. I'm a horror like nut. I would love to get them signed, but I know that it's going to eventually degrade. So I have them on like paper towel rolls, and they're taking up space that I could definitely better use on other stuff. And at least now I know when they finally go to hell in a handbasket, I can just buy a new one. It's not like I have to get it re-signed or
right. Well, the story, the infamous story. I don't know if it's infamous, but the sort of well-known hobby story about how Sean Clark, a pretty well-known agent for cons in the Northeast, he bought a bunch of the original costumes from Killer Clowns from Outer Space,
Yep.
that movie, and a lot of them were severely degraded because they're all latex. And I believe the story is that he had tried to get some of them restored, and some of them were successful and some of them were not, because there is it's not this kind of thing where, if you store it in a better, if you store latex in a better environment, it will last longer, but it 100% will eventually degrade and disappear. That is not something you can. It's like VHS tapes. I don't care what you do with them. You can store them in the Library of Congress. It doesn't matter. Eventually, anything that is organic material will eventually degrade. So it is sort of an interesting microcosm of the greater universe that we exist in. And I really didn't. I think you could agree. I'm not sure we intended to go down this existential road
No.
when talking about.
I've actually depressed myself a little bit, but it's okay. It's okay.
But it is true, and it makes you pause. And actually, the funny thing was, I did buy a latex mask from a different lucha guy at that show. And now thinking about it, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing, but whatever.
Better enjoy
so you
it
also,
while you can.
yeah, and you also went to see Common.
I did.
Also.
After we got done recording last week's episode, I got right on the train. I got my standard bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. I met a friend in there, Bobby Apt, a KNS regular. He's always down at the Sportatorium. And yeah, it went honestly better than I would have liked, because I was unprepared. As we talked about last week, when you have that like uncertainty about extra items, you're left with a position of, do I go out and spend, 30, 60, 90, however many you buy on purchasing vinyls that perhaps you don't get signed, and you're stuck with these things, which, I mean, I have no need. I don't even have a tool to play a vinyl. So if it's not signed, it's worthless to me. But anyway, we got there like 2 hours early, which I quickly realized that this store, Rough Trade, that's not the kind of store it is. I walked in the store 2 hours early just to check if they had any like old catalog on Common that I could pick something up. And they seemed almost like shocked I was there 2 hours early. They're like, "Oh, normally people show up 30 minutes early." And he's like, "Oh, the line will start out front unofficially." So we found nothing in the store. We got online. It was the complete opposite of Little Tekka. It was all people my age and older, so that was nice. I didn't feel like I was on like lunch duty or something.
More civilized, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely more civilized. We talked music, we talked wrestling. Somehow you always find someone that likes wrestling. It just happens
Always.
everywhere.
Always.
And we got inside, and just the ultimate like kick to the nads was watching the guy in front of me who had a bag of literally Common's entire discography. He had CD booklets, he had vinyls, must have had at least 12 pieces for Common and maybe 3 to 4 for Pete Rock. And Common hit them all. He hit every last one. And I'm just standing. Yeah, I felt like a complete idiot. I should have bought what I could have bought, but whatever, it's fine. So I got up, I was like second online. I got my vinyl signed, and then they also had these nice little 11x17 like double-sided posters from the label for the album. So they signed that, which it seemed like that wasn't going to be a common thing. Like the few people in front of me online sort of skipped that poster.
Did you intend that pun or no?
I didn't until I saw it. Actually, Bobby's the one that saw it because he was like right in front of me. I didn't see the table from that side of the table yet. And he
I was asking if you intended the pun.
Oh no.
It wasn't going to be a common thing.
Oh no.
And
I'm still coming down from my COVID vaccine, so I'm not. That pun went right over my head. But yeah, it was very good. Photos were great. Everything was great. I would definitely return to Rough Trade. Have you ever done Rough Trade?
No, and that for anyone who knows that the name of that store is one of those things that just I cannot believe that in 2024 a store has that name. I recommend not Googling it, by the way, but it's just no, I've never been, and yeah, I heard good things about it though. Is it a book and CD store or is it just music?
Mostly, from what I saw, mostly music. They may have been like one small little rack. But if you compare the inventory in there to Looney Tunes, I would say it's probably 20% of what Looney Tunes has. It was quite like minimalist. There weren't like piles and stacks all over the place and these deep racks. It was a little shallower. It was a little bit more streamlined, I guess.
So
And
is it like new release heavy or?
Sort of. They had some used, but like for example, there were a lot of big names that you didn't see anything. Like had I looked for common used records or even brand new records at Looney Tunes, I most certainly would have found 2 or 3. And that just annoys me saying it out loud. But I would have found a couple, so I should have shopped there first. I thought, oh, we'll see how it goes. We'll see if they have one. They didn't, and yeah.
Look at you, but, unpaid commercial for Looney Tunes.
Yes. Looney Tunes is the place to be, unless you want to sign vinyl, in which case, don't go there. Just wait for the website a few days later. But yeah, the only takeaway, and that's when I realized that like everything I do with, thanks to this podcast and just our years in this game, it's all like I'm standing there like flabbergasted because like their space is part of like Rockefeller Center. It's right next door to the NBC studios. It's like across the street. I could have hit Radio City with a rock if I threw one. Like it's right there. And I kept saying to people,
you could have hit it with 30 rocks.
Yeah, that pun I got. That pun didn't go over my head. But I kept saying to people, I'm like, how do they pay rent? What must rent be here for a record store that I'm watching people walk in and out and they only had stuff for the signing? Like, how many sales could they make? How is this possible? And everyone else is just like a regular individual, and they really couldn't care less. But I was so fascinated by how could they survive and like what would have to be one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in the city.
Yeah, it's funny because dabbling in retail, obviously we're not in the same retail universe as store like that. But dabbling in retail, I often see stores that are in business and just wonder. I cannot understand how they stay in business. A lot of like these comic book stores and baseball card stores and these retro video game stores that are popping up, and you're like, how are they knowing what it takes to sell items at retail and the margins that you're operating at, how on earth are they even meeting their expenses? And that's definitely a complicated conversation that I'm not sure we have the answers to. And what I suspect the answer is that a lot of these places are running on losses. But that's a whole other discussion.
Topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it for common.
That's it. All
right.
good.
So just to break quickly, if you're shopping for autographs, you want to check out at you want to check us out at www.markedoutcollectibles.com, our eBay store at Marked Out Collectibles. To contact us for any reason, please email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Marked Out Collectibles official marketplace on Facebook. And all links are in the show notes on Facebook and Substack. So let's get into this, something that's definitely going to make us some enemies. Granted, I think the people we're going to make enemies out of are the people who don't like us anyway. And I certainly have fought with these people in the past. I know a bunch of them have blocked me on Facebook and stuff. So let's talk about consignments. So this is something that has been rocking the con world, the non-sports con world. I would say for the past 3 or 4 years now, it's really picked up steam in the last 2 years. And obviously, like everything else we say, these things have been going on forever. The consignments have existed forever, literally thousands of years. But in the con market, especially the non-sports market, they've really picked up steam pretty dramatically. So I guess we'll first start off by talking about what our definition of a consignment is, because I think that in and of itself is a little bit controversial and worthy of discussion. Definitely, you and I have had our slight disagreements about what a consignment even is. So I guess you go first. To you, what is a consignment? And then I guess we'll talk about kind of the nitpicking aspect of it.
Yeah, it's a very it's a loaded word. I want to just throw out there, of course, here at Marked Out Radio, we endorse nobody because it's just an unpredictable world out there. But I do want to point out that the people that do consignments that I talk to on a regular basis, if you're listening, you know who you are. The nasty things I'm going to have to say about consignments is not about you. If I talk to you, I'm not talking about you. It's the people I don't really deal with that you just sort of shake your head at the unprofessionalism that you see out there. But to get back to your question, how do I define consignments? I see it as it's people that sort of take on a business role, and they come at it from a very amateur place. Like there's zero planning, there's zero skill or touch or anything. For a lot of these people, they're just sort of taking your items. They are waiting on lines like anyone else. They are completely at the mercy of whims of the talent. There's nothing like pre-negotiated. And obviously, any deal you do, no matter how negotiated it is, you're always at the mercy of the talent. But like they are a little bit more so, I think. I'll get deeper into it, but I really don't have the most flattering view of consignors. How about you?
Well, the concept of consignment, I think in this case is a relatively simple one, and if people stuck to what it meant, then everyone will be fine. So the concept is, I want something, but I cannot attend. I want something signed, but I cannot attend that signing myself, for a variety of reasons. Either I don't want to, I can't get there, it's too far away. A lot of consignments benefit, like, often people with disabilities, right? Because they can't sometimes travel to far away. Sometimes I have another thing scheduled and I need something done by a talent who's in a different location. So there is a logic to it. And so I basically send my thing to a consignor. They pay the talent price plus a fee on a fee on top. That's what they charge, whatever it is, on top for their time. And they send it back to me and they get it done the way I wanted to. So they're almost like acting as a proxy for me. If I get a consignment done by someone, they're acting as a proxy for me in that environment. And I've done a couple of consignments here and there. There's one person I did a consignment with who was so good that he actually had a GoPro on and he recorded the entire interaction that he had, so I could almost have, like, it was like I was there.
That's a nice touch.
Yeah, it was very cool actually. And so um and that's pretty much it. And in theory, the consigner is making a little bit of coin because they're charging a fee, and you as the customer are receiving a little bit of convenience out of it because you don't have to travel. And so often, if you do like the net cost of things, if you do nothing but consignments, it can actually be cheaper than going to a con because you're not paying the con ticket, you're not paying the travel, and so on and so on. So potential hotel and everything. And so there is that. However, I would say again in the non-sports world within the past 2 years, um, consignments have skyrocketed in their presence, and also in their just the sheer number of them, the sheer number of the consignments, and the number of consigners has completely blown up. And so if you are at any major con, you will encounter the consigners. Those are the guys with the big giant um, wheelie carts filled with stuff. Um, they are frequently complained about. A couple episodes ago, we played a TikTok of someone basically complaining about not getting through lines because the consigners are taking up so much time. But a lot of the big cons um, you go to, there will be people complaining because a consigner will be in line, and sometimes a consigner can take 30 to 45 minutes at a single table, depending on the volume of stuff that they have. So it is that there's lots to debate about consignments, because on the surface there is a lot of positive there are a lot of positives that consigners bring to the table, right? They do give easier access to rare con guests, and that access is not constrained by geography. They also, they get you access to a table autograph versus, sometimes when you do bulk signings, you get bulk rushed autographs, whereas consignment autographs are at the table and you could, be more um precise with your demands from the talent. That sometimes, of course, goes sideways, and the talent will do the exact opposite. But that's that ultimately you're at the whims of the talent. Um, that's it. It should be a good thing, but there have been significant consequences that have arisen as a result of consignments. So I guess let's talk about them, because not for nothing, and I guess we'll dig into this piece of it first. You could make the argument that some of the signings that we do, I'm throwing Black Taurus as one of them, let's just say, that you could make the argument, and people have and will make the argument, that that is a consignment. Do you agree or disagree that something like the Black Taurus signing was a consignment?
I think at its simplest, like the simplest definition of a consignment, I would say, yeah, it probably is. Cause like, we didn't pay for the flight. We didn't deal directly with the talent. I didn't have a conversation with the talent prior to that. It wasn't my event. I didn't set it up. But there are fundamental differences that I feel gives our opportunities and our things a little more of a quality control than the standard consigner, if that makes sense.
Like what?
Well, we're not usually smack dab in the middle of a line where you have, the talent just heard one life story. There's a person behind us that has, their baby picture they want to get autographed. We typically do it away from the crowds. We do it either before or after in like a remote location. You have more time for things to dry. We've seen consigners on lines near us that have, 12, 13
Um,
things in paint, and they're like, doing a juggling act because there's no real place to lay stuff out to dry because they're in the middle of a line. We have space typically to let stuff dry. We pay, which you could argue, what does that really, how does that make things better for the buyer? But we don't pay to, straight up retail, which I think makes us a little bit more sustainable. We usually work out deals with the promoter ahead of time where we have our own rate, which allows us to bring the customer, our customer, a better price, a more competitive price that is sustainable for us, that we're not, operating on a loss, or we're making like 2 nickels. We're making enough to keep going, but you guys are getting a price that's competitive as if you were there. Did I miss anything?
no, that's pretty much it. I was thinking about um, when we did the Olivia Hussey Leonard Whiting signing, and We were the only people offering a private signing with them online. And I mean, look, that was by design.
Yeah.
And but there were people taking consignments, and I remember the people taking consignments had reached out and were like, well, what are their prices going to be? And I remember thinking, I'm not telling you that, because that allows you to in some way work your prices to be competitive with me. That you know, where our the whole point of that, we were offering, you know, mail in and stuff on that talent, and we could work the best rate as a result of controlling the talent. And yet, which just blew me away, and yet there were still there were still consigners who walked up to that table. We've had consigners come to every single one of our guests, which is fascinating to me because we also offer mail-in on all of our guests. So there are some promoters who don't offer mail-in at all. They don't want to deal with that headache. And so it makes sense if you're working with a promoter who doesn't offer direct mail-ins, then you go with a consigner you trust. But we were offering, you know, direct mail on all of our guests, and still we had consigners at the table. And so there's no question that people were paying those consigners more than they would have paid us, because the consigner is paying full retail and also
Yes.
not necessarily getting you know, a level of access that the direct promoter gets. So it is an interesting idea that you know, you say like there's not an obvious direct benefit to us getting a rate, you know, a lower rate from the talent, but there is somewhat of a I guess an ancillary benefit in that we're not operating on absolute razor thin margins. The way the consigners run, they operate on razor thin margins, and if a mistake happens with a consigner, it's a much bigger deal for the
Yeah.
customer. We have much more flexibility with fixing a mistake, and there, which is why it's funny, because there are certain signings when we're not offered the benefits of, you know, establishing what we call a private signing. There are lots of times where we're offered opportunities where we pass because it's too much like a consignment. The margin is too low, and it's not worth the headache of, I don't want to sit in line uh at a show and make a couple nickels on each item. Doesn't make any sense.
No. Yeah, let's I like you know, that point you just made. Let's talk about that for a quick second. We also, that's another thing. Consigners are typically dealing only in items people have sent or pre-purchased. They don't really hold an inventory. That's kind of a gift and a curse, and I'll tell you why. It's a good thing in the sense they're never stuck with things they can't move. It's less money out of their pockets. It's kind of all just sort of, actually, the money almost never enters their pocket. It's money that someone hands them that they hand the talent. It's not really their money they're using. But we had one, I think you should remember this. Remember, we sent friend of the show, Jeff Seltzer. We mailed him a box of he ordered from our Matt Riddle private signing, and he bought an Elite figure, he bought a Funko Pop. And it looked like when the box reached him, it was packed beautifully, bubble wrap, paper. Anyone that's bought from us, I've never heard anyone complain about the packing. We always go to the extra level just to make sure it's all padded. But somehow that box looked like the mail truck had driven over it, backed up, and basically rode right over it again. It was destroyed, completely destroyed. And Jeff sent us pictures, and there wasn't even a hesitation. I just told Jeff, keep the stuff, save it, chuck it, whatever you want to do. A new box is going out tomorrow with the exact items he had, just repackaged. We were able to do that because we had an inventory. Had we
Right.
been a consigner, that would have been his personal items that got destroyed, through no fault of ours. That's just something that happens when you deal with shipping. It's just inevitable.
Right.
But
Then
we would not have
when
been
you're
able.
dealing right when you're dealing with a business, the business is able to absorb a loss, whereas the
Yeah.
consigner, if a mishap happens with a consigner, which it will eventually, statistically speaking, it's on the customer to absorb that loss. That's actually a really
Yeah.
great point that I didn't even think about.
So that's a key difference for me, I think, with that. But Sean, let's talk about it really quick. You have, as you said, we always, every signing we do, as you see on this show, even we always mention our mail orders. I would like to think our digital footprint is somewhat fleshed out. People know about us. Why do people still send in the consigners when they can send in directly to us? What would motivate someone to use a consigner over the promoter directly?
I think that there is a weird psychological thing going on. Maybe it's not weird. Maybe it's actually very normal. There's some psychological issues here that come into play, and that is that the initial, at least this space, in the non-sports space, the initial push by consigners was that consigners were doing people a favor, that it was almost like a transaction between friends as opposed to a business transaction. And the idea being, because that's how the consignments, at least on a lot of the Facebook groups that I'm on, it started out with, oh, I'm already going to this show and I have 10, I can take 10 consignments. The reason why I'm doing it is to, make it so that I'm lowering the cost of my own ticket. So I'll take 10 consignments and I'll do them and I'll help some people out. That's always the framing. I'll help some people out, get their stuff done. They pay a nominal fee and everyone is happy. And honestly, if that were the model, I have no problem with it. It would be no big deal.
Yeah. I
I'll help
think
some of
that
my friends out. I'll lower my costs. Everybody wins, right?
Yeah, I think
And
that's definitely the sentiment. I think the average customer that uses a consigner, they feel as though they're getting a more personal touch. They feel like, vendors like us, vendors that are bigger than us, don't really care. It's a faceless. You don't know this is Jeff from Milwaukee's item. You don't care it's Jeff from Milwaukee's item. You're just rushing. The consigner is going to take a personal level of interest in getting this done the way you want it. And I mean, has that been the case? Are consigners universally a better quality item, a better quality product than going direct to a vendor in your experience?
there's a lot of funny things that happen with consigners, and this is the part that I always fight with them on the Facebook groups about. You can't have it both ways. You can't be running a business and making money and then at the same time say and cry about it when things don't go your way and say, well, I was only a hobby. I'm just trying to help out. And like I remember there was this one kid, I can't remember his name. I despise him though. And I call him a kid because he's like 20. And he started out as exactly one of these things. Oh, I'm just helping out a bunch of friends. And soon he was traveling around the country and funding this travel through his consignments. And on some level, I'm like, okay, bravo, good for you. But then he approached the talent and he had taken, I'm not joking, he had taken $10,000 worth of consignments for a particular talent. And the reason why he was able to get $10,000 worth of consignments is because the talent was running private, I guess, or one of the larger vendors was running a private with that talent, and the price was a lot higher. And this consigner was charging $10 over the table price, and so it was a lot lower. And so he gets to the table. And I'm not joking. I'm not kidding. I did the math. $10,000 worth of items. Okay, worth of autographs. He had I forget what the exact values were. It was a very high value autograph, and he had like 50 pieces. It was like $200 autographs at I'm trying to remember, at 50 pieces or something like that to get the $10,000. And the talent refused to do it. And he was crying and complaining about it on the Facebook groups that, oh, people shouldn't be mad at me. It wasn't my fault. I got up to the table. And it's like, well, no, you were trying to play act at running a business when you were really just a kid, being a goofball. And it's all fun and games when everything goes well. But, we've now been in situations where signings have not gone well. And being a professional and running it like a business helps these situations go from a disaster to a success. And
Absolutely right.
and that's one of those things that if you're not a professional, if you're a doofus who is just, wanting to claim like you're not a business while at the same time that you are, I have a big problem with that. And that is in the Funko groups, that's especially pervasive. A lot of these guys, it's almost uniformly guys, they get on there and they act like they're everyone's friend, and they're taking consignments at $10 a piece, $10 fee, and then here's a good example. There are so many of these cases where these guys take a month to ship after going to a show, or take 3 weeks to ship. So it's just, first, Dana, when we do a signing, how quickly after the signing do we ship items?
Pretty much, if a signing's on a Saturday, everything's in the mail on Monday. That's in large part because I think that's the only way to do it, and I actually love that you brought this up because there's people that aren't consigners that are like vendors, Facebook vendors that, you know, you can argue how close they really truly are to being consigners, as you said even about us, but they'll get like annoyed if someone complains like, and, you know, about shipping times, and they will always say, well, you know, I can't ship every week, I ship every other week, and like that's insane. If you can't, to me, if you can't ship within 48 hours of payment, you should not be doing this as a business. You're far too busy, you're far too disorganized, your life is just too robust and active that you can't dedicate the time you should be dedicating to a business. I have I'll say it, I have zero respect for any vendor that's taking weeks to ship.
I mean,
Zero.
my favorite thing is when the people say, I need time to get back from the show and decompress, and visit with my family." Again, it's like, grow up.
Yeah.
Again, it's a
Personally,
business.
yeah.
When I buy something, and this is something that, I mean, as a business person, as a retailer, I am compassionate towards my customers, especially if they receive something that is damaged or that is, of a quality they didn't expect. I know what it's like to be a collector, and when I don't receive what I paid for, I am upset. And I know that as a customer, I really have very little patience for someone who is going to do the song and dance of, well, I'm not really a business. If you're not really a business, then you shouldn't be making a profit and taking my money.
No,
If
absolutely right.
otherwise, that's, if you want to make a profit and you want to take my money, if I believe the service is worthwhile, I'm more than happy to pay for it. But you better deliver on it. And this nonsense, this game they play with the, well, I need time, and all these different excuses that come up, that just shows that it's amateur hour. And the reason why this has happened is because there's, a series of market forces that have occurred to allow this to happen. But we'll talk about it. It's funny because the biggest complaint from customers and from fans about consignments is something that I don't care about at all, which is long lines. A lot of people, this is like on the Chiller Theater group, and sometimes on the Pittsburgh group or on the Rhode Island group, people complain that consigners cause long lines. Do you think that's true? And what are your thoughts about it?
I think, I mean, any person on a line is going to increase the length of the line. That's just, basic, science. An extra person, yeah. So yes, on that level. But I like, imagine if it wasn't consigners. You have a consigner with, let's say, 15 items in their cart, which, by the way, we take carts everywhere and we're not consigners. So I mean, talk about looking like a consigner everywhere we go. But that's not the point. If you have a consigner with 15 items, that's probably 15 different people's, let's just use this for for that example. You have 10 to 15 people, let's say, that sent their items. Would you rather have one consigner with 15 items or 10 to 15 people individually on that line with their item, assuming geography didn't have any sort of impact or role in this?
It's actually such common sense that I don't understand why it's still a discussion. Line length should not be a reason to discourage consigners. And you have all these people complaining that, oh, you should limit the number of items per person because it's not fair to the people who waited in line. You will always have lines in cons. That is how cons operate. They by definition do well when you have a lot of people showing up to them. And complaining about lines, I mean, look, lines are the way that people make money operating
Yeah.
cons. Literally how they make money. They do. If there are no lines, they don't make money. And so I will never understand the complaint about how consignments make lines longer, because I believe you're right. They make con lines shorter, actually,
Yeah.
because the people who might be going, now you might say, well, those people wouldn't have gone, and that might be true, but that means that the guest would make
Is not
less
making
money.
that money. Yeah. And let's go back to one of our favorite topics, one of our favorite underlying topics, which is that whole parasocial relationship people have. And you have people out there. I've had this argument on the groups. I'm actually presently banned from the Monster Mania group, and I'm still trying to figure out why. And it's probably something to do with this argument. You have the people out there who will look at the nicest celebrity in the world. Let's use Matt Lillard as an example, the person that seems to love every second of the interaction. Is Matt Lillard going to Monster Mania if he comes away from the last Monster Mania and makes, a real crappy return?
No, of course not.
It's a business. A lot of the fans don't want to believe that. Matt Lillard comes to hear that they watched Scream when they were in college and it made them just, quiver, and they were so excited, and they told their RA and it changed their life. Matt Lillard may care about those stories. I don't know. I personally think he's a far better actor than his film credits would even let you think. I think he's like Oscar level actor that he just makes these fans think he cares. But neither here nor there, he would not come if he wasn't making money. So consigners are part of getting money in these guys' pockets and getting them back at the next show.
It's such a no-brainer that it's actually the best argument for why consigners should exist. And I think there is a universe in which consigners benefit everyone. And so longer lines is just a ridiculous argument. There is an argument, though, that is a little bit more interesting, which is that consigners contribute to rising prices at cons, because a lot of this stems from, and it goes hand in hand with the premium item controversy, which we'll actually be talking about next week, I believe.
Yes.
But the idea is that the consigners usually just don't walk up to the table with crappy 8x10s. Consigners will often walk up to the table with very high-end, unique, interesting items, or high value items like Funko Pops and full size movie posters and things like that. And so, when you have the celebrities at the table, they know when they're selling their garbage 8x10s that they know they're not being resold. But when they see all of these items one by one coming across the table that are all higher end items, that contributes to the decision to raise prices. And so there's lots of argument that consignment is contributing to the rise in prices across the board. And there is absolutely no question. And it's actually infuriating when people say, "Oh, the rising prices are due to inflation." When you look at the rising prices at cons, are so outpacing inflation that it's a stupid argument to say. So, what do you think? I mean, is there anything to this idea that consignments are contributing to the rise in prices?
I think much like the idea of consigners extend the length of the line. Like, of course, if a talent comes in, let's say they price themselves at $50 and their line's around the building and they're making a ton of money, for the most part, short of a couple of people that have held firm for years and years and years with the same pricing, I think it's a natural a facet of economy and business where you'd say, let me extend my pricing a little bit. Maybe if I go $5 more, I'll keep the same line, I'll make more money. That's the nature of being successful. Look at Apple, look at Sony, look at all these companies. If the PS5 is selling at this price and they couldn't keep it in stock, that tells them for the PS6, well, it could be $100 more, and let's see how that goes. And you keep trying to push the envelope further and further to increase your profits. In some cases, the cost of production goes up, and you need to do that. You're not really making yourself a better margin. But on that level, yeah, the more money talent sees that they're making, they start thinking, "Ooh, I could charge more." Maybe it's greed, maybe it's intelligence. It's that would be a philosophical question. But I think obviously the more money a talent makes, the more they will think about if they could charge more.
So yeah, I mean, it is true. I have no doubt in my mind that consignments have contributed to the rise in business. I mean, obviously, if more people have access to the cons because of consignments, then by definition they will have increased the number of autographs sold, which in turn will increase the prices of those things. Even though autographs are not, especially of the living, are not by definition a scarce commodity.
No,
because their supply is theoretically infinite. That there's no question that consignments do that. The question is whether it's a negative. And I guess, look, if you're a con goer whose ability to attend cons is constrained by finances, which quite frankly is most of them, I would imagine, it's a concern for you. But it's honestly a caveat of engaging in a luxury hobby. I mean, that's what hobbies get more expensive. That's what they do.
yeah,
So.
I mean, I always hear that argument. Like, I'm for some reason it pops into my head when Randy Quaid was at Monster Mania, and you had people. I forget the exact pricing, but his pricing was high, and a lot of people was skipping on autographs, which I was one of them, or they were skipping on him altogether. And I know that's like the like tried and true just like little pun and statement that people make. Well, if you stop spending the money, they'll learn that way. Prices will go down if you don't keep paying them. But like, here's the deal: Randy Quaid didn't do that great at Monster Mania. By my look, I was there for one day. He spent a lot of time just sitting around, twiddling his gloved fingers around. He really wasn't doing a hell of a lot of business. Have we seen Randy Quaid emerge from the last year? Have we seen him around here at cheaper prices, or have we just not seen him at all?
I mean, well, that there's a lot of ego that factors into these things. A lot of these guys will not they'll not lower their prices. They'll just come around less frequently.
So
So
it's
that's a
not
whole
always
other.
it's not always a thing where, oh, if I don't spend this money, I'm not going to get the person. I know I'm going to make the person change their price. It doesn't always work that way. If Mel Gibson had a completely awful time business wise this weekend in Salt Lake City, something tells me you just won't see him again. He's not going to come in and say, I'll chop my prices in half. I don't think he needs the money that badly.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on how badly the talent needs the money, to be honest.
Yeah. Agreed.
So then, but there is, I think, a kind of an offshoot of this argument that is true, which is that certain celebrities, and not all, but certain ones, see someone walk up to the table with all this stuff, and they know that it's a consignment, that they in some way get, I don't know if the right word is offended, but they feel a little bit burned. And we've talked about this before, about the idea that someone is making money on their name, and that is upsetting. Like, certain celebrities love it. Certain celebrities will like, bring it all. I want to sign all of it because they're there to make money. But other ones who are there like for the ego boost or whatever sometimes get a little bit salty about consignments, which in turn makes the overall process more transactional. So I have seen that happen too, and that's we can debate like whether these fundamentally at a con, when you speak to a celebrity, it is a transaction. That's not a debate. It is a fact. It's a transaction, but a lot of people sort of delude themselves into thinking that it's not that transactional because the celebrity is personable or listens to them blab about stuff or what have you. So this definitely makes that process like transparently transactional. You can watch it go down as a transaction, which is, I think, distasteful to certain fans and certain celebrities.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had talent say to you, whether you were doing business or just a lot of stuff for your own collection, you've gotten the, should I make this out to eBay? Is this for eBay type of comments, right?
It's without fail, like the biggest dumbasses who say that, who have no concept of the value of their own stuff. Those are the ones who say that.
The one interaction I've had that was sort of like that, but was actually like extremely positive, was Jeff Jarrett. This was a few years ago. You may remember this. Remember, I bought like an entire like lot of those like Jeff Jarrett like concert flyers that they like dropped from the ceiling at one of the WWF pay-per-views. I had like 20 of them. I worked out a deal with the vendor who had him in, and I got them all done. And Jeff like was asking me about the whole like nuts and bolts of the business, but Jeff Jarrett's a businessman. Like, that's who he is. I would argue he's more of a businessman than even a wrestler. Like, that's like his first thing. He's always looking for business and starting things. And he made it very clear. He's like, I hope you do great with this. Like, he was just asking like general questions. What'd you pay for the prints? What are you paying for me now? What are you going to get for these? What's my autograph worth? He was just fascinated by the business, like what kind of profit someone like me makes in this business. Like, that was fine. I have no problem talking business with talent that actually wants to just understand it better. But there's some that'll take an attitude and they want to sandbag, and they're like, they resent you for indirectly putting money in their pocket, or the pocket of the vendor who's putting money in theirs. And it's to me, it's just insane, because if that vendor loses money and they tell their friends, "Oh, don't book, Tito Santana, I took a beating," then your phone's not ringing anymore. Like, it's all like symbiotic of having, if one person wins, you win. But a lot of talent doesn't get that, and they do take a sort of a angry approach when they feel you're making money off their name.
Yeah, but I think all in all, the biggest issue facing, or the biggest issue why we care about consigners so much, and why their presence is annoying to me, is that there is no standard of quality for the consigners. They're individual schlubs basically who appear on Facebook groups, and so you don't really have any sense of who's good and who's not good, who does a good job, who ships quickly, who takes care with the pen, who pays attention to the requests, and who doesn't. And so the quality varies tremendously based on consigner, and you constantly have new hobbyists entering this space because, look, prices are expensive. And if I can, make a little, if I'm going to be online for whoever anyway, well, I might as well take 5 or 10 items through instead of one and make a little money on those so I get mine for free, more or less. So I totally understand the incentive to
Yeah.
want to do this. But the
And,
problem is when you have, when you have so many entering the marketplace, then you have perverse quality and price incentives happening, which is what we're seeing.
yeah.
And so go ahead.
I think honestly, it's bigger even than the whole topic of consigners. It really comes down to just people being in business that have no business being in business. And maybe it's the COVID vaccine in my system. Maybe I'm just in a bad mood today. But I'm actually going to just comment on one more thing that ties in with this whole thing with consigners. You have what you described again with no quality control. We don't know when they're going to ship. This is the same thing with like Facebook, like wrestling vendors. There's a ton of them out there, and they all should not be doing this. Oh, well, I work full time at Target. I can't ship your item for a week. Then stick to Target. You should not be doing this. If you're a consigner and you can't ship quickly, you should not be doing this. There's a lot of people that have that razor thin margins, selling at a loss just to get money back to do the next thing, that screws over the person like us that has inventory they're trying to move the right way, that protects the value of talent and other vendors. So it's consigners. It's really, to me, the bigger thing than even consigners being that there's some that are bad. It's just amateurs. You should not have amateurs doing business that are not equipped to do it.
But I think in this particular case, there's a lot of incentives for amateurs to join this because their payment is not in dollars necessarily. Their payment is the ability to get to go across the table of people who are like celebrities or celebrity adjacent. And so, it's not even about making money. Some of the consigners are happy to even lose a little money. It just means it lowers their cost of meeting people at the cons, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a kind of a perverse incentive here where money is not the incentive, it's something else, and it's something else abstract that's kind of hard to quantify. But what's interesting is like a lot of the groups now, like one of the larger groups on Facebook that I'm a part of is the Funko Autograph Society, and that went from being a place where people show off their Funko autographs to a place purely run for and by consigners. And there've been a lot of arguments on that that group in particular because their rules, their group policies actually incentivize very bad consigner behavior at cons. So for example, they have this weird rule, and I argue against it in public, but I think the rule benefits people who run it, and so they don't really care. But the rule is that if you're a brand new consigner, you're only able to charge $10 per item. If you're a more experienced consigner with a certain number of positive feedbacks in the community, you're allowed to charge like $15 or $20 an item. And so what you're doing basically is you're incentivizing the people with the least experience, the people who are most likely to screw up, to charge the least amount, and then which incentivizes price conscious customers to seek out those people.
Yeah.
Right. So what ends up happening is you have this proliferation of this constant march of brand new consigners who are one and done, who do a poor job. They charge $10 per, and there's always this fighting, with people who didn't get what they asked for, didn't get what they wanted, didn't get what they paid for, and they say, well, what did you expect? You wanted to pay $10 instead of $15, and in saving that $5, you gave your money to some 19-year-old doof who's going to screw it up. And
yeah, I think in a roundabout way they did get what they paid for. It's just not what they were expecting to receive for their little discounted rate.
Right. And that's that issue, the proliferation of so many, for lack of a better word, dummies who are out there, doing consignments, and screwing it up, causing general havoc. There's also, as a result of the consigners, it's like anything else. When I pay someone for a service, I expect to be treated like a customer. Consigners have a lot of them have this weird mentality that you should be treating them as if they were a friend or as if someone's doing you a favor. And I find that very insulting, that if I give you money, that you somehow think that you're doing me a favor. It's like, no, the opposite is true. By
Yeah.
giving you my business, I'm doing you a favor, because I could be giving it to one of 100 other dummies out there who are doing the exact same thing, which really doesn't entail any skill or finesse.
Yeah, I guess that's the problem, expecting to be treated like a customer from someone who inherently is a customer themselves, and they don't have any idea to understand that.
And it's crazy because there are so many of these consigners who do thousands of dollars in business a month, and they still act like whining babies when confronted in public about their poor customer service. And I see it all the time. And they're as a cohort, there are a lot of people in there who are they're terrible at what they do. They are terrible for the hobby. And they drive a lot of people away. I mean, look, infamously in that group, and this is something that the group hasn't reckoned with yet. They dealt with it, but they haven't reckoned with it. Is one of their trusted consigners, one of these people who was doing consignments for a long time, was taking high volume consignments, was responsible for a major forgery situation where at least one or more of the cons they were at, they were mixing in high dollar forgeries as
Jeez.
consignments with legitimate consignments. And so how do it became a fiasco, and there's a bunch of fake stuff out there as a result of this proliferation of consignments. Anytime you have the unchecked growth, but look, a lot of it is because the prices have gone out of control, and a lot of the companies running private signings, and as people who have run private signings, people don't realize that there's a reason why private signings are as expensive as they are, because there are tons of costs. The celebrities, they know they have you by the jewels. They know that you have to pay for all of their expenses. So if I'm with a celebrity, I have to pay their hotel, their flight, their meals. Sometimes celebrities demand that you fly someone else with them to sit next to them. Just you're paying as a private signer, you're paying for prints, you're paying for items, you're paying for all these, you're paying yourself, sometimes, for the expenses you incur for gas and things like that. And so there are fees, there are costs that are just associated with that. And the consigners, in circumventing those costs, seems like a great idea, but you do not get the level of quality control that you get in a controlled environment. And it should be common sense, but for many people, it's not.
No. Common sense is not always common.
And so, look, if you want, and if you're a person who wants a bargain on everything, then you really need to understand what you're getting. And a lot of people don't. And I understand why. I do understand why. That they don't really understand, but here we are, and that's what the consignment scene looks like now, for lack of a better word. So, any last word on consignments?
No, I think we kind of covered it. Like I said, there's definitely better ones out there. Not that we endorse anyone, but there are better ones out there. And if I talk to you, this is not about you, but there's a large amount of them that are completely just unprofessional goofs.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, they're not even making any money.
No,
That's the truth.
and you
The ones
can't.
who are bad at it are not making any money.
And on a business level, like those are the vendors out there that I just hate the most, because on a business level, how do you compete with a person that's not trying to make money, that just wants to be able to say that they had IRS in their car? If that's all they're looking for, well, you're going to get that every time. I can't compete with you because you're going to sell things at a loss. Same with consigners. If they just want to be up at the table a little longer, pay a little less for their stuff, and they're happy losing some money along the way when when things don't go well. You can't compete with that.
No, but I will say this: if you have expensive items to get signed at a con and you send them through the mail to a consigner, you are taking a significant risk.
You're braver than I am. I've never done it, and I honestly can't see a scenario I ever would.
So I mean, the consignment that I was most happy with was I'm a huge Kids in the Hall fan, and at the time, Mark McKinney, one of the Kids in the Hall, he had never done any public appearances, with where autograph signing was available, and all the other kids had, and so I had several kids pieces with all the other kids except Mark McKinney, and so he was doing they were doing a thing at Fan Expo Canada in Toronto. I was not going to go to Canada at the time. It was during the work week and everything, and so I needed to use a Canadian consigner for that. And the guy I used, like I said, was excellent, just really excellent. And yeah, he was the one who did the videos and whatnot. And so, but honestly, I was sending 8x10s that I had gotten them done in person by the other guys, and I also had him buy whatever 8x10s were at the table as well, because I figured, in for one, in for all. And he was great, and that consigner was great. But I also paid more than $10 per item because, he
You
was a
wanted a
better
quality.
consigner.
You
I
wanted a
did.
quality presentation.
I wasn't going to take a risk on someone who had never done it before, who was new, and end up getting hosed. So I did. It did work out in that way, but it's just about being careful and understanding what exactly you're paying for. So yeah, so that's that with consignments, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about the in the future about some of the unintended consequences of how the business of cons has changed in the last couple of years. So with that said, our download counts, our subscriber counts have been going up every week, which we thank you for. So if you like
Yes.
this at all, if you're interested in the hobby, if you you're like, we've gotten so much feedback from people who say, it's so great to have people talking about this stuff, since this is the kind of conversation that we would always have online at cons, standing and talking to each other, but it was never kind of presented in an organized way. So if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. Leave ratings and reviews wherever you can, and provide feedback to us on YouTube via comments or via email or on Facebook. We're always looking for ways to get better and always looking for ideas for what to talk about with these cons. So yeah, I mean, we're heading into con season right now. There's a bunch of big experiences for us coming up. We talked about New York Comic Con a little bit last week. Any news on that front?
Yeah, actually, a few days ago they added Star Wars John Boyega.
He's a very rare name, actually.
He is. I actually attempted him once at New York Comic Con. He was like at Madison Square Garden doing some panel, and I was out there for over an hour, like on the rail waiting. And of course, he snuck out one of the other doors.
You got blanked big time by John, but you got big time by John Boyega.
Yes, I mean it wasn't quite as good as the time Class 316 went to New York Comic Con, and he was at Madison Square Garden waiting for Andy Serkis, and Andy Serkis apparently told him, "I'll get you on the way out." So Class spent like hours waiting at that rail, and funny enough, he like tweeted him like, "Mr. Serkis, please, I'm still out here waiting," and he like snuck out a back door like hours ago. And Class was still waiting, which is funny, but at the same time, it could happen to all of us. It has happened to all of us. That's just the nature of the game. So I will be happy to get John Boyega in a cash transactional way that I don't have to go waiting on a rail for hours.
Yeah, it's funny, man. That's just it's sometimes it's so easy to pay that it's just worth it.
Yeah, are you getting him?
I haven't decided yet. It's one of those situations where I probably should, but I mean, the newer Star Wars movies, like they were all right, but it didn't knock me out, And I haven't rewatched them, so it's like, do I care? And I haven't checked pricing, but I imagine, he's a small fortune, and it's like, it's what the problem for me now is I'm at the stage where it's like the cast of Starship Troopers is there, right? And Starship Troopers is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I already have multiple cast pieces from that movie. I was like, do I in for the price that it would take to get John Boyega, I could get nearly an entire cast piece.
Yeah.
And it's like, what am I doing? Yeah, I don't know. So yeah,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, am I gonna get him? Probably, because I'm mentally ill. But not without some serious anger about it.
yeah, I'll be honest. I'm splitting a photo with John Boyega with Ira, and Ira bought it because he's apparently part of that metaverse thing. I don't know how much he must spend a year to be in that like circle that he gets these early emails. But
I heard he won it in a contest.
oh yeah, on the radio. But I don't even know what the hell I'm paying. He said, you want to split it? I said yes, and like I'll be honest, I haven't even looked at what it is. So I don't even know what it costs. But whatever it is, I'll pay it because again, mental illness it's hard to shake. So here I am.
So I think that's it for. I mean, I think next week, we talking. No, in 2 weeks we're going to talk about New York Comic Con in depth, because New York Comic Con is a funny show. The main guests have been announced, but then, like the week before, a whole flood of vendor guests will pop on the site. So I'm sure we'll have lots of stuff, and hopefully, anyway, some interesting things to talk about.
Oh yeah.
On that front.
So guys, for those of you that haven't spoken to Sean much before this podcast, let me explain how it's going to go. In 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, we're going to hype New York Comic Con. In 3 weeks, Sean is going to come on and announce his retirement. He will lose his smile, and he will hate all things involving this stuff after New York Comic Con. It always happens. He will be on the brink of suicide at New York Comic Con.
There have been multiple times when after New York Comic Con, I was like, I'm done with autograph collecting. I hate this hobby. Because those shows can be so fun, but also so incredibly demoralizing at the same time. And yeah, I'll save it. It'll end up. I'm sure it'll end up happening when we recap the show.
Oh, you know it. You
although
just know
last year I had a good time. I really didn't have many serious issues with last year's show, but
plus we parked in the shadiest parking spot ever, and the car wasn't like stripped for parts, so that was nice.
Yeah,
that kind of put us all in a positive mood.
So yeah, I'm excited to talk about Comic-Con in 2 weeks, and hopefully they add some new stuff. Right now, John Boyega is big, but I like the little things, the weird little offbeat things that they add at some of the exhibition booths. Those are sometimes some authors, so just weird stuff that it's like who did they add last year? Exhibit, remember? They added
I'm still annoyed about that. Yeah, so, I'm hoping they do something like that.
As a big fan of Pimp My Ride back in the day, when they added Exhibit at the last minute, I was like, it was literally, I think it was like within the couple of days of the show starting, they added him, and it was so late that you couldn't even get a ticket to that day, right?
No.
And I was able to meet Exhibit at some random comic book booth that he was promoting some comic book, and so that's a lot of that is what it is you get these random people. I also last year. Gary Anthony Williams, the voice of Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks, and he was also Abe from Malcolm in the Middle. Like he got announced at the last minute. He was my favorite guest last year. Just literally at the last minute they announced these people at the booths, and so I'm excited to see what comes up. But we're not going to know for the 2 weeks, so we'll come at it at that point.
Yes,
we also. Tuned. Yeah, you were looking at the Rhode Island Comic Con is coming up in November, and we'll definitely have a hype show for that also. But you were looking at the website, and you noticed that one of our predictions had come true.
Yeah, if you go back a couple months now, we were talking about when we got into Contropolis, which is sort of the ugly stepsister show of RICC by Altered Reality, and we actually spoke to a talent, which there's one listener of this show that like messaged me, and he saw through our smoke and mirrors, and he kind of like said, I know who, which talent told you that. And he was right. I actually confirmed he was right. But like the talent explained to us how you kind of pay your dues at Contropolis, even if you don't make a hell of a lot, so you get your foot in the door for Rhode Island, where you do make a nicer payout. And a lot of the people that were at Contropolis who paid their dues, guess what? They are at Rhode Island. They are.
I'm actually surprised because Spencer Grammer had canceled Contropolis, but still was invited to Rhode Island, so maybe her cancellation was legitimate because
Or
I
they're gonna
doubt they.
make her sit by the bathroom as punishment.
And look, I was pissed about that. So whatever punishment they want to dole out, I'll accept.
Yep.
But yeah, but it's funny. A lot of those people are now booked for are booked for Rhode Island, so we'll be seeing them there. It's shaping up to be a decent lineup, but again, a lot will happen in the next month, and a lot of people who can't be announced until 30 days before will
Yep.
suddenly start getting
Uh,
announced. So we'll
at this
talk about that
point,
more.
at this point, I think my RICC is going to be in the 3 figures, not the 4 figures, but I'm sure they'll get to the 4 figures by Showtime. It always happens.
They always manage to pull some really cool guests out of their sleeve and do something cool. So we'll see what they are able to do. Hopefully coming up. So if you're shopping for autographs, check us out always at www.markedoutcollectibles.com. Check out our eBay store, Marked Out Collectibles. To contact us for any reason, you can email markedoutcollectibles@gmail.com or join the Facebook group Marked Out Collectibles Official Marketplace. All of these links are in the show notes. We have 2 private signings coming up where we're taking mail order. The first is a big one for us, Barbara Bain, the star of TV's Mission Impossible and Space 1999. She's 93 years old. All items are due, and all orders are due October 23rd.
Yeah.
Only a couple weeks. And
That's
also,
crazy.
and ECW legend, WWE Hall of Famer Paul Heyman. All items and orders are due by November 7th. So that wraps up our discussion of consigners, and I'm sure in future episodes we're going to find reasons to complain about consigners again.
Yeah, it's always fun. It's always fun to take some shots at the consigners.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get banned for some more Facebook groups. It'll happen.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for listening. And so for Marked Out Radio, Marked Out Collectibles, and markedout.com, I'm Sean.
I'm Dana.
And we'll see you next week.